Noah's Ark by Foswally. Noah was said to have been several hundred years old, and like anyone logging those kinds of numbers, his screws were beginning to loosen. And it wasn't just the fishnets and vaudeville cane that had neighbors murmuring. He got it in his head that God was pissed about all the freaky experimental sex going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. Everyone knew those were college towns. Hell, Nova himself had lifted the hem of his moo-moo a time or two back in the day. But God wasn't having any of it. Between the idolatry and buggery, homophobic, insecure Old Testament God planned to drown the world. A less rash God might have chosen 2 righteous men to build 2 arks, to separate the carnivores from the herbivores. The flamingos wouldn't last 5 minutes with that Karate Kid posing bullshit. Noah suspected both giraffes were male, and that they didn't seem to mind. His son Shem would be an inspiration to the strychnine-sipping snake handlers of Appalachia. And his wife Balzada ought to have known better than to mock the bears. Son Japheth found sandpapering the assholes of the crocodiles to be an inefficient means of coaxing them from the swamp. Had God had the foresight to know rhinos and tigers would be slaughtered wholesale for their horns and balls to make erection tea, he might have let the last of them drown. And while we're bullshitting, why do the walruses get off the scrimshaw dagger handle hook? The elephants were asking. The red sweat coming off the hippos' badonkadonks had the alligators hungry to swap. Why Shem, Ham, and Japheth were dressed as cavemen was a mystery, but Noah's lower back trouble seemed just fine long enough to haul his bushel basket of Maui Wowie on board. While Shem explained to the beavers just how far he'd shove one of the electric eels up their beaver asses if they started chewing holes in the ark, Noah wondered why the hell walruses, seals, and eels needed to be spared a flood anyway. But knowing ultimately it was Yahweh or the highway, he dutifully ushered them aboard. You'd think a 600-year-old man would have developed some friendships over the years. Maybe even sneak a few of the better-looking ne'er-do-wells on board while God was busy scolding another planet. But no. He battened down the hatches and threw lengths of 4x4 at anyone who approached. True to his word, God let loose with torrential rains, flushing the lascivious sodomites from their dens of iniquity and roasting off their offending parts with lightning. Though both towns pissed off God so bad a vein in his forehead bulged, Sodom would forever be associated with depravity, while Gomorrah is merely an Irish greeting. Life aboard the Ark was marginally better. Nothing was secured to the deck, and no one had anticipated the staying power of owl farts. Noah remained fairly calm. He'd carved himself a mango bong, and left much of the work to his sons and their wives. But if these 2 male giraffes didn't get their deep-throating asses back in the closet, God'd probably have them all treading water. On the 40th day, Noah, half out of his weed-steeped mind, popped open a window to vent the methane, when the idiot pigeon that was always rubbernecking the grain sacks flew out. Noah fretted the next several hours over which birds would now live on to shit on statues of him, when his fine feathered friend returned with a sprig of primo Turkish sticky icky clutched in its beak. They made landfall shortly thereafter, and within hours were inundated with rabbits. Noah was jib-jabbing about whether he'd saved bison or buffalo. Were those mules or donkeys? What if the tortoises mated with the turtles? Then he took a deep drag off his mango, and none of it continued to matter. The impalas ran to the plains, the leopards made for the jungle, and the reptiles were riding a contact high. The Ark was far too shit-stained to recycle for building materials, so they burned it. God, realizing he'd been a bit of a douche killing the world over a few hummers and ass play, sheepishly dragged a finger across the sky, colorfully apologizing for the tantrum, though he'd be keeping a close eye on that duck in the beret. Noah's family had a good laugh and set about repopulating the Earth with their extremely shallow DNA pool. The end.